What is my story? And no. Before you write this point off as one of those abstract philosophical points, let me tell you what I mean. This is what I like to call the peacock bummy theory. The remaining questions, the remaining guidelines are what will take a good photograph and turn it into a great one when you have the opportunity. The key is... Today's video has got nothing to do with the camera, but everything to do with the photograph, which is why, regardless of whatever device you're shooting from, be it a cell phone or a digital camera, this video is for you, and it's on one of the most important topics in photography, and that is composition. But this is not my first video on composition. I had made one other video called the 9 Guidelines of Compositions, and I still think it's pretty good, but there is one problem with it. It's basically like a maths teacher walking up to the board and writing a set of trigonometry formulae and asking the students to solve a problem. The question is, where do we begin? Which is why today's video is not going to be about the 9 guidelines of composition. It is going to be about the 4 questions that you need to ask yourself, which will help you compose a good, impactful photograph. I'm going to be sharing a workflow that works for me, and I hope it will work for you too. On that note, let's begin. So what is composition? Basically, it's the art of placement or arrangement or combination of elements in your photograph which will help you tell the story in a more impactful, in a more aesthetic, pleasing and memorable way. We're going to straight up begin with the first question. But before that, I would like to give you one small disclaimer. Because I'm a wildlife photographer, most of my examples come from that genre. But the guidelines of composition, this entire workflow of approaching composition holds true for whatever genre of photography that you are practicing. On that note, we're going to move to question number 1. What is my story? And no. Before you write this point off as one of those abstract philosophical points, let me tell you what I mean. Is it the story of a tiger that has just hunted a porcupine? Or is this the story of a tiger that's cooling off in a pond under the shade of a canopy? Is this the story of how a golden oriole builds its nest or where it is building it? Is it the story of the lovely scales and details of the Pope's pit viper? Or is it the story of its home? And finally, is this the story of a sloth bear's diet? Or is it the story of its skill and scale as it reaches for it? Many times we click the shutter button and then look for the story within the photograph. But it should be the other way around, no? So next time you're on the field, first look up from the camera, look at the scene in front of you and decide of the entire scene that's unfolding in front of you, what tiny part do you want to include in your photograph? Because that is going to give you the answer to what lens you need to shoot from if you have a collection of lenses, what focal length to shoot at if you have a zoom lens, and whether or not you need to zoom if you have a cell phone. And once you get the answer to question number 1, half your job is done. You are already going to make a good photograph. Now coming to question number 2. How do I create a balanced image? Now we are extremely chaotic beings, which is why the human mind craves balance. And that's exactly what, as photographers, we try to achieve through a well-composed photograph. We try to make a photograph that has some sense of balance. And balance is not equal to symmetry. Symmetry is only a part and one way to achieve that balance. Now there are many techniques through which a balanced photograph can be made, but we will be focusing only on 3 of them because 90% of the time these 3 will do a fantastic job. The first one is center aligned. Typically, we use center alignment when the subject or the scene has symmetrical elements, or in cases where the subject is looking directly at the camera. Now, the second technique to create a balanced photograph is the rule of thirds. Now, this I know is an extremely overused technique, but rightly so. It is very effective and time-tested. Basically, in the rule of third, we are dividing our frame into a 3x3 grid. And the grid lines and the points of intersection of the grid are the places where we'll try to place our subject or the key area of interest in our photograph to create a balanced image. The key decision to be made here is which of these lines and points do you want to place your subject at? The answer is very simple. Place your subject in a manner so as to leave more space in the direction in which the subject is looking. It can be left or right, and even up or down. The rule of thirds not only helps in placing our subject in a strategic manner, but it also has a role to play in placing some key lines in the photograph, one of them being the horizon. And the beauty is that you get to decide where you want to place the horizon at which of the lines, and that depends entirely on what you find more interesting within the frame. In this photograph, I thought the sky was beautiful with drama from the clouds, which is why I placed the horizon along the lower grid line. But in this image, I found the ground to be more appealing. I loved the colors in the midday sun and how the zebras stood out against it, which is why this time I placed the horizon along the upper grid line. Another technique which is very effective to make a balanced image is called the Steelyard technique of composition. Basically, in this technique, we are going to place our main subject closer to the center and we are going to balance it with a much smaller element further away from the center, closer to the edge. So these are three ways in which we create a balanced image. Now that we've made a balanced image, comes question number 3, which is how do we draw the attention of the viewer to our subject and how do we hold the attention in our photograph. And for that, again, there are many techniques, but there are 2 especially effective and simple techniques to use. The first one is the use of leading lines, and the second one is framing our subject. Let's look at some of the examples for leading lines. Now, some lines are fairly obvious, but some others may be a little subtle. Also, some lines are straight while others can be curved or wavy. In fact, you can even come across an S-shaped formation, and when you do so, definitely use that because it is extremely effective. But remember to use the leading lines correctly. Just placing any kinds of lines across the frame does not make them leading lines. Leading lines are called so because they lead the viewer to the subject. So while you're composing your shot, ensure that the lines are leading to the point of interest within your photograph. It could be the subject, it could be a house, and it could simply be the horizon. The next technique is frame within a frame. Take this photo of an owl, for example. We could make a balanced image in this manner. But by just zooming out a little bit, we have added a frame to the photograph that now instantly captures and holds the attention of the viewer on the subject. And frames too can come in various shapes and forms. And this brings me to the last question that we need to ask ourselves, and that is, how do we introduce a certain degree of depth in the photograph? A photograph ultimately is a two-dimensional medium, which is why we need to try and incorporate as many depth definers which will add a certain three-dimensionality, which in turn will make the photograph a lot more impactful. And 2 of my most favorite ways in which I introduce depth are layers and foreground blur. You will be amazed at the number of opportunities that you will find to introduce layers within your photograph. Layers can come in various forms, shapes and sizes, from mountains to clouds to trees to other subjects in the background. And foreground blur is another very effective technique to add depth to an image. Shooting at eye level or through some elements in the foreground can give us this effect. Remember, however, to keep your f-stop number at the most minimum possible to achieve this effect. So these are 4 questions that we can ask ourselves in order to create a well-composed photograph. It's basically giving us a method in this madness that is composition guidelines, and it's essentially a simple workflow which will help us become better storytellers, better photographers, one step at a time. But there is one other point which is more of an overarching point: perspective. The art of seeing things differently. This is what I like to call the peacock bummy theory. Basically, we all love taking photograph of a peacock. It's one of the most resplendently colored bird. But yet, there was a moment in the wild when the peacock slowly turned, and I realized that its backside is just as intriguing. I clicked a photo and this is what it looked like. And this is what my son loves to call the peacock's bummy, and hence the peacock bummy theory. So the idea is to keep our eyes open and try to find new perspectives in which we can tell our story. With that, we have reached the end of this video, but not before I leave you with my 2 cents. Photography is about having fun, but I've noticed that the moment this topic of composition comes up, we forget to do just that. We somehow get wrapped up in our heads trying to make that perfectly composed photographs that we forget to enjoy the process. So I'm going to just ease it out a little bit for you. Focus on question number 1, because the moment you have the answer to question number 1, you already have a good photograph. The remaining questions, the remaining guidelines are what will take a good photograph and turn it into a great one when you have the opportunity. The key is to not stop having fun, because I think the whole idea of the perspective, it comes in when you're enjoying the process. So never stop doing that. On that note, I will see you again for part 2 of composition. Until then, take care. Bye.